Hello everyone and welcome back to the Chiblo Devlog series. In this video we will be talking about the foundation stones for the game, that is concept, graphical style and fight mechanics. We will also be mentioning items and skills as they are core elements, but won't be going too in-depth about it because we are not done fleshing this out. Please note that some of the things presented here are subject to change. Chiblo came about as a mix between Zorga's idea and an idea of mine. Zorga is working on a series of games called The Sweet Meal the Ground, and thought it would be fun to create a game where you play the characters of the series and fight random animals as mobs. He originally came to me for technical advice on how to implement that in RPG Maker. I told him that it would be easier to just create the game from scratch ourselves. We are also working on a similar game based on the Smash Bros series, so I threw the idea of making the same project but for the Diablo universe, and that is how the Chiblo project was born. There were a few disagreements about the game at first, as he wanted something light-hearted and I was envisioning something a little more dark. However, after some discussion, it turned out we had a very similar game idea and that only the content aspect changes. Turns out, when he wanted to fight crabs with patisserie rollers wielding girls in bikini, he didn't intend it to be easy, which was the thing I also wanted for the Chiblo. Once we had a good idea of what we wanted to do, we included a third member of the team, Michael, who was also interested in designing the game and creating his own content. Based on the experience we have with the other game, we knew that creating content is very difficult for people with little artistic experience, so we wanted to make it possible to create a new character with as few drawings as possible. In order to do so, we came up with three main techniques. The first was to remove the amount of directions needed and use mirroring whenever possible. Diablo originally has the following direction implemented, and for Chiblo we removed some of them in order to be left with these. Then, using mirroring, we can only do the east side and the west side will be done automatically, leaving us with only 5 directions to draw for characters. At this stage, we also already knew we wanted simple animations, so about 3 or 4 frames per would be enough. The second was to simplify gear diversity and standardize animations. By reusing the same attack animation for every character, we can animate the weapons separately and reuse them, as well as minimize the amount of different animations needed. For weapons, we came up with these weapon types, and the following animation type for each weapon. We end up with a total of 8 different animations, including standing, running and dying. We also decided to get rid of walking and running and only have one movement animation. As I mentioned in my previous video, the character equipment will have the following types. All these simplifications were not enough though. If you have to redo each animation for every combination of gear you can have individually, each with 3 frames, you end up with close to 1500 sprites to do. We then realized that it would help to separate the body parts based on the equipment and came up with the OTL system. The way it works is that we animate head, torso and legs separately, and when drawing the characters on the screen, we just combine the different animations. This system, combined with the fact that some animations can be reused, for example to animate the running we can keep the head and torso as static, we vastly decrease the animation workload. Death being a special animation as it is unique and not separated, we end up with a total of 12 animations for a total of 36 sprites per character, which we estimated was doable even with little artistic experience. Note that the OTL system is only for characters. Mobs are simpler as they usually do not have varying equipment and static objects don't usually turn. As a note, we found out after coming up with this system that Diablo 2 works in a similar way, just with way more pieces. Another thing we are exploring to simplify graphic creation is the use of 3D rendering, but I will touch on that in a future video once the tests are done. Finally, the fight mechanics. We knew right away we wanted to have melee take center stage in the game. That doesn't mean that ranged and magic will no longer become viable, but we want them to be equally strong, with maybe varying degrees of mechanical skill required. The most obvious thing we thought of in order to do that is to remove the concept of attack rating. In Chiblo, if your melee attack touches, it deals damage. Same goes for range attack. We also changed the way shields work. Because attack rating is gone, and we want to do away with RNG deciding anything in combat, we also removed blocking. Instead, shielding becomes active and you can raise your shield to protect against the attack coming in front of you. The protection isn't perfect though, as some percent of the damage still goes through, decided by the shield's block rate. That means that a good player can take very little damage in melee, but being surrounded by a group of mobs is deadly. We have decided to keep Diablo's mechanic of breakpoints to increase attack, casting or shooting speed, as we thought it was important to give players the ability to make their character faster, especially in melee. As for magic elements, we are going in a slightly different direction than Diablo, as we would like to avoid the problem of damage over time. This poses the issue of what to do with poison, but we have not yet reached a decision with it. These are the elements that we came up with. Each element is associated with the ability to leech HP or MP, and we would like to associate each element except physical with a special effect, like how cold slows you down in Chiblo. We are not giving that, by the way, that sucks. We haven't found exactly what we will give to each element yet, but we were thinking of wind being able to push or pull an enemy, fire deal damage as a ground trap, and water clearing any negative effect on the map. When it comes to character stats, we are thinking of keeping the ones present in Diablo, strength, dexterity, vitality and energy, but renaming energy to intelligence, and are still working on the effect each stat has on the character. One thing we would like to avoid is to have each archetype only having to increase one stat in order to get stronger, but we are not too sure how we're gonna go about that. There are a few very important things in the game that I have not talked about in this video, like maps, events, items or the editor. I will talk about the editor in a dedicated video, and for the others, we are still working on them and they are not presentable yet. That's it for today's video. You can catch me programming live on Twitch on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, link in description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.